Hey everybody, welcome to this special report for Kokx News. Today is Friday, August 22nd, and there's big news out of Rome this week where the Society of St. Pius X held a pilgrimage, a Jubilee pilgrimage. Something they do every time Rome declares it's a pilgrimage. And had a pretty big showing, 8,000 pilgrims from the SSPX's website, 44 different countries. And Bishop Fellay was there. The society did this many years ago, 1975. You see a photo of Archbishop Lefebvre, of course, 1 year after his famous 1974 declaration. Here's some interesting photos. The society had a chance to enter through the holy door at St. Let's see here. Led pilgrims from the Holy Cross of Jerusalem to St. Mary Major. In the Vatican. Again, Bishop Fellay was leading that. There's some photos here. So a procession here to St. John Lateran. That was the biggest, I think, part of all this to see the society. There's Bishop de Galarreta, Father, I forget his name. It'll come to me. So yeah, very pretty, very beautiful. A lot of pomp and circumstance, and looks like hundreds of priests. And yeah, so everyone is praising this. Everybody. Here's Kennedy Hall tweeting about this. Is there enough communion yet for the naysayers? Catholic News Service has a little video here. Anthony over at the Avoiding Babylon podcast had this to say. If you can see it here, look at all those partial schismatics. So obviously, driving the point home, hey, there's not an issue here with their communion status, right? Oh yeah, they're so evil, as a lot of trads will say. Of course, winning, Lewis says in response to, I'll bring that back up here real quick. Sorry, guys. To Mark's tweet here. 1 second. Sorry about this. All right. Winning. Okay. Mark Tizak, indeed. So big win, right? For a tradition. Maybe not. What do we say about this? What's there to think about this? Well, I don't know. I think Chris Jackson had a pretty good take. Here's what his response was. SSPX in the big tent. He's responding here to Kennedy Hall's tweet. And then there's the curious case of the SSPX being listed in the Vatican's Jubilee calendar. Some will cheer it as a sign of reconciliation, but note the company. The same big tent also includes the pro-LGBT group visiting later this year as well, under Leo. And then Chris says, this is not a victory for a tradition, but an invitation to join the circus. In exchange for silence on Leo's doctrinal betrayals, the SSPX gets a spot in the program alongside the very movements it once condemned as incompatible with the Catholic faith. So, obviously, we don't know. Has there ever been a deal here? Obviously, we only see the fruits of what the SSPX is saying and not saying now. And it is obvious. It seems quite apparent to us that this has to be viewed in response or in context to the larger desire, or the need rather, for the SSPX to have bishops. They're down to 2, right? And what better to put on a big display to give everybody a win, right? Leo comes away looking as if he's friendly to tradition. The SSPX, gets to go to Rome and play its part in this solution to this crisis. This is what the optics tell us. And how can this be a bad thing, right? You're a doomer, you're a real schismatic, or you're a sedevacantist if you oppose this, right? Well, I don't think so. I mean, there's a lot to get through here, and but I think again, the way this is being sold is as a huge win, right? For this SSPX, for everybody, for saying this SSPX is not in schism. This is a young influencer named the Traditional Thomist. I think his name is Nick, and I'm going to butcher his name, Kavezos. Sorry, Nick. Didn't mean to butcher that, but here's Nick's program.
We are so back, ladies and gentlemen. We are so back. Pope Leo XIV, Sovereign Bishop of Rome, has welcomed the Society of St. Pius X with open arms into Rome, into the Eternal City, into the Holy City. What a great day this is. This is honestly, truly amazing. I speak slightly tongue-in-cheek. It's not as official as Pope Leo welcoming everyone in, but cool news to report, the Society of St. Pius X has been added to the Vatican's official website.
All right, so you get the the point here. Big win. The society is normalized essentially, or it looks like it is. Obviously, it's not, but it's a good thing, right? For tradition, everyone wins. Everyone's in on the big tent, right? Well, I tend to have a different view of this, and I want to go through why, because I wrote an article earlier today for Kokx News, and I want to explain why I don't share in the optimism or the hope or whatever you want to call it. I live in reality, and I've been around long enough to know that the society condemned entering into the ecumenical zoo of the modernist Rome in decades past. And so I'll go through my article today. Now, obviously, is a single procession to Rome a sign the SSPX has fallen, that it's betrayed its founder? Obviously not, right? This was probably planned years ago. And simple facts are that they went to Rome, they got permission to go into some churches, and that's that. But again, you cannot ignore the context of which any of these things happen with the SSPX anymore, especially given, again, the fact that they're down to 2 bishops. And that's significant. So here's the article. Go to Kokx News to check it out. Subtitle, Is There a Side Chapel for Tradition in the Conciliar Church? And, my big first initial takeaway is that this is the SSPX doing the FSSP impression, right? They get to role play here. They get to have a little fun. They get to put on the nice vestments. They get to go to Rome, etc. We've noted Chris's response. So when Nick says here that we are so back, that we're so back under Leo, he's wearing the red vestments. Let's not forget that women are running the Vatican. Leo appointed and is still appointing women to high-ranking positions of power to oversee clerics, right? We saw that in a number of appointments here. This is Sister Tiziana Merletti as Secretary of Dicastery for Consecrated Life. We've seen from other appointments here, Rich Rejo in slate of new appointments today to the Vatican office. Pope Leo names 5 women as members of Dicastery for Consecrated Life. 4 of them are superiors of religious orders. So, is this winning? Is this, we're so back? Is this what returning tradition to its rightful place in the Vatican looks like? No. Again, we still have priestly blessings for homosexuals. Kissy Fernandez is still in charge of the Dicastery for doctrine, right? For ecumenism, essentially. Latin masses are still canceled in Detroit and North Carolina. So, I mean, what does this mean when we say we're so back? Are we doctrinally back? I mean, that's the only thing that truly matters. So I'll keep scrolling down here. Again, we've already mentioned Chris's take here. I want to bring up, and this is maybe something that a lot of young trads, Zoomers, maybe even gripers, they're not super traditional, don't know about. What has the SSPX said about just overall relations with Rome in years and decades past? Again, if you're 23, 24, 25, coming into SSPX, maybe you've grown up in it, all you've ever heard of is that what Bishop Fellay tells you about the SSPX. So today I want to go through what else the society has said about generally relations with Rome. and why I think this is not a victory for tradition. It's not a we're back moment. And so here's Bishop Tissier in 2024, right before his passing in that year. But he gave a sermon in 2015 that I want to kind of go through, that again should remind people that, again, the SSPX of old, its primary focus was to call out the errors of what Lefebvre called Neo-Protestant Rome, right? That was the focus. These are heretics. They're wolves in sheep's clothing. It wasn't get to see us as Catholic, approve our venture. In fact, they said the complete opposite, as we'll see in just a minute. But here's what Tissier said in 2015. If you want to go watch this, there is a link here. It goes to the YouTube sermon that he gave in 2015. And I'm not even sure if Nick or Kennedy Hall know about this sermon. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe they don't care about it. Maybe they disagree with it. But this is, I think, the most important part, and I'll just read it. Here's what Bishop Tissier said in the sermon, which I think he later actually had to walk back, because this is 2015. This is 3 years after, 2012, which is a significant year when Bishop Williamson was not invited to the meeting of the superiors. And that's generally considered when the SSPX sort of shifted. Basically, the Vatican II of the SSPX occurred in that year. And it was when the SSPX said, okay, we will now accept a practical accord with Rome before a doctrinal agreement. And obviously, yes, there were various doctrinal preambles and statements and requirements that SSPX sort of laid down, but really those were just kind of paper tigers, and they were never really. I mean, look, the arguments that Bishop Fellay used in the 2010s was just please recognize this. We have a right to injustice, our personal prelature. So. We'll see what develops years ahead, but under Leo. But the cat's out of the bag as to where the SSPX has been on this, and Bishop Tissier here is spot on about the SSPX of old. And here's what he says: all right, let us reject the wrong supposition of some of our friends, bad friends, who say the Society of Pius X is now in an abnormal situation, because we are not acknowledged by the Church. He goes on, the Society of St. Pius X must come back to a normal situation and receive a canonical status from Rome. That is wrong. That is false. We are not in an abnormal situation. The abnormal situation is in Rome. So I'm hoping you can see here how he's turning this whole situation on its head. It's not about so much the society itself. It's about that the SSPX tradition is in the Church. It's those who have broken off. It's the conciliar authorities. It's the modernists in Rome who have usurped the power, who have broken off. The abnormality is on their part. The irregularity is on their part. Okay, so everyone's saying, again, oh, we're so back. This is great. The SSPX is not, as you can tell, obviously in partial communion or still in schism. You got to flip this upside down. You got to flip it around the other way. Again, it's Rome who's in schism with tradition. It's the putative popes of the past 60 years who are in irregular communion with their predecessors and the magisterium of all time, right? Which is why they had to make up the term authentic or living magisterium, right? So they had to go and break all these rules and say, oh, it's a living magisterium. We're not the ones breaking tradition. Tradition is living, not stuck in amber. In any case, let's go back to Tissier's statement. We possess the faith, the sacrament, and the disposition to obey the Pope, to submit to the Pope. We are not in an abnormal situation. The abnormal situation is in Rome. We have not to come back. He says again, let us reverse the reality. We have not to come back. The Romans have to come back to tradition. And this is what the SSPX of old, used to know and used to teach. This is why, again, Bishop Williamson was kicked out, because he, again, reminded he was a thorn in the side of those who wanted a practical accord without a converted Rome for the society. And again, he stood up for that, and he reminded everyone of that until his dying breath. And this is at its heart, liberalism in tradition. It might sound like a very strange thing to say, but liberalism in tradition, what does it actually mean? Well, let's recall for a second. What does liberalism do? First and foremost, it redirects the focus away from the object towards the subject. In other words, it makes the creature, instead of the creator, the focus or the cornerstone of reality. This is why liberals will say, oh, you have a right to say this or that. You have the freedom to believe this religion or that religion, right? This is what liberal Catholics in the 1800s demanded. They said, we want a free church and a free state. The founders of the United States were liberals too. They said citizens have a right to religious liberty, freedom of speech, freedom of association, etc. But anti-liberal Catholics, traditional Catholics, those who opposed the liberal Catholics' mantra of a free church and a free state, they knew that to be a Catholic means to say error has no rights. Okay, objectively, that which is false has no rights. And they also said, traditional Catholicism, the popes of the time, said the state has a duty to recognize and to pay its debt to God by upholding Catholic religion. So, if we apply this to the situation at hand, well, why does it seem that everyone simply wants a free society of St. Pius X and a free conciliar church, an ecumenical church? We just want to be one of many in this institution. We want to have tradition on display in this pluralistic institution, which does not recognize Christ the King, which does not recognize tradition, the doctrines of the faith of our fathers. No, it's a pluralistic modernist usurpation. Yet the SSPX and others, they don't necessarily focus so much anymore on saying, well, Rome needs to convert, right? Rome is promoting false doctrine. Obviously, SSPX does and has videos on the crisis in the church, etc. But as an institution, when's the last time you read Father Pagliarani letter about how there's no room, how Rome has to embrace tradition, or how modernist error has no rights in the church? I mean, again, the inversion is apparent here, okay? And this is, again, what we heard of over the past 15 years of the Society of St. Pius X. Again, those who are astute observers of this, not everybody has been. Not everybody knows what the past of SSPX has been. The main talking points have been focus on the rights of tradition. We need to have tradition freed and to have Rome free and to allow the experiment of tradition to continue. The biggest argument I think that I heard in the 2010s was that it is a matter of justice that the SSPX have its canonical situation rectified. A matter of justice. Again, you notice how that sounds, very traditional. Yes, we need to restore something that was wrong. We need to correct the past, which was an injustice, right? But again, this is really just simply to say what American trads and Catholics will say in the U.S. today. Oh, well, it's a matter of justice that we have the little nuns on the bus or little sisters of the poor not to be infringed upon their religious liberty, to have to pay contraceptives and things like this. We deserve our religious liberty in this pantheon of the United States, right? Now, to a certain extent, obviously that must happen. Civil rights in a pluralistic society must be respected for Catholics. But ultimately, our goal has to be on the conversion of the United States to the kingship of Christ. That's our primary focus. That's what Catholic action has to be geared towards. And yet, this is what has happened in the SSPX. They want to just simply say, oh, well, give us crumbs, give us a seat at the table, give us an opportunity to be free in this conciliar institution. The focus has not so much been, again, that it's an injustice to God that these popes, these modernists, these usurpers in Rome need to get thrown out or at least convert to tradition. Again, that's what we should be doing. It's focusing so much, what are the rights of the SSPX? Okay, so again, it's an inversion. I called this out in 2016. If you're interested in reading this, go back and click on the link here. This is an article I wrote in 2016 explaining why I don't think was this an effective argument, and it was actually more just liberalism on display in the SSPX. But let's continue on, because Lefebvre himself, again, said a lot of things about about Rome, about the society's relationship with Rome. And again, he was definitely in the 80s. And you can read, the history of SSPX with Bishop Sanborn, the Nine, and how Lefebvre, really in the 70s, at the very start of the SSPX, was hiring sedevacantist a clergy to teach the students, and that sedevacantist thought was quite common in the early days of Ecom. And then after Paul VI died and John Paul came in, it was around 1983. That's when the nine left, and they said Lefebvre, wanted to go in and try to have Roman approval for what he was doing. It wasn't until 88, the last days, in fact, before the consecrations. Again, this is a screen grab of Lefebvre right before he consecrated the four priests, that he recognized it was a fool's errand. It was liberalism all along. It was no dialogue is possible, as we see here. And if you want to read this interview conducted in 1990, click here. But here's what Lefebvre says, and he compares himself to the liberal Catholics in the 1800s who were condemned by the great popes of the era. So here's what he says. In the last few weeks, since I am now unemployed, I have been spending a little time reading the book by Emmanuel Barbier on liberal Catholicism. And it is striking to see how our fight is exactly the same fight as was being fought then by the great Catholics of the 19th century. He says their fight is summed up in the encyclical Quanta Cura, with the syllabus of errors, and Pascendi of Pius X. He says this is the fight we are in the middle of today, exactly the same fight. So again, we need to defend tradition in the face of modernist usurpers in Rome. And he says there were obviously forces of the revolution, the heirs of the revolution, and there was the hand reached out by Dupanlop, Montalembert, Lamennais, and others who offered their hand to the revolution and who never wanted to invoke the rights of God against the rights of man. This is what he's saying. The liberal Catholics back then, Lamennais, Montalembert, said, we ask only for the rights of every man, the rights shared by everyone, shared by men, shared by all religions, not the rights of God. And so Lefebvre is saying here, again, we are in the same situation. We must not be under any illusion. We are fighting a fight guaranteed by the whole line of popes. So he's saying here, we should not be fighting so much for to be simply free in this conciliar institution. No, we have to put it at the very top. We have to say to those authorities, just like the authorities in society that were reminded by Cardinal P, Louis Veuillot, Pius IX, Pius X, it's the authorities that need to recognize the truth, and then that will trickle down. We shouldn't be fine with just simply being in a cage in the zoo, a side chapel in this pantheon, right? That we're just going to have tradition over here. That's what Leo XIII actually said in the 1890s for Catholics to rally to the French Masonic Republic, and he was harshly criticized for that because it basically put the church under the goodwill of the church's enemies. And so here's why Lefebvre also says we should have no hesitation or fear of going on our own. Why should we be going on our own? After all, why not join with Rome? Why not join with the Pope? He says, again, if Rome and the Pope were in line with tradition, if they were carrying on the work of all the popes of the 19th and the first half of the 20th century, of course we will. But they themselves admit that they have set out on a new path. They have set out on a new era began at Vatican II. They are pushing the revolution forward. So, I hope you can see here how Lefebvre is making the argument that we cannot just simply be content to be a side chapel in the conciliar church. We cannot be content with simply the rights of tradition. And he said this in 1990. So he was evolving and still maturing on his thought about how to approach this crisis. Again, after the 88 consecrations, Lefebvre was at peace. He said he felt a great peace about this. And I think in those last several years, he had more grace given to him to see clearly the crisis and what was going on and the extent of liberalism seeping even into his thought in the 1980s to try to strike a deal with Rome. So, this idea that the society is going to simply repeat what Lefebvre did with the Vatican in the 80s, well, we were going to ask for bishops. We're going to try to strike a deal. We're going to have a doctrinal preamble. We're going to have various safeguards. That is, at this point, an unwise, imprudent move, because we've already seen since 1988 the extent of the continued destruction and usurpation of the Vatican authorities and their hostility towards Rome. We know what Benedict did with Summorum Pontificum, how he corralled trads and wanted to keep them from going to the SSPX. This is why a lot of these institutions and more Ecclesia Dei groups were basically set up, because Benedict did not want trads to go any further to the SSPX. Okay, so What else did Lefebvre say about all this? A lot more, actually. And even Bishop Fellay, who led this pilgrimage, has talked about this too, as well. So Lefebvre, again, he says later, we do not have the same outlook on a reconciliation. We don't agree. It's a dialogue of death. It's a dialogue of death. We've been through this already. He says, supposing Rome calls for renewed dialogue, I will put conditions. I will place discussion at the doctrinal level. Are you in full communion with these great popes of the past or not? Do you accept the anti-modernist oath or not? If you do not accept the doctrine of your predecessors, it is useless to talk. Useless to talk. So what are we talking about today with Leo and Francis before and Benedict? They are part of the Vatican II revolution, okay? Think about Vatican II as the communist revolution when it set up the Iron Curtain in the Eastern European countries after World War II, right? Each of the successors of all those various countries, Romania, Czechoslovakia, etc., Poland, when one of them died, the next one, Russia, would just step right up and continue the revolution as it went forward, okay? That's what these popes are doing, okay? They are not traditionalists. They're not friendly to traditionalists. They are dyed-in-the-world liberals. They are sheep's in wolf's clothing until they're wolves in sheep's clothing until proven otherwise, right? So we have to acknowledge that. Here's Lefebvre. As long as you do not accept the correction of the council in consideration of the doctrines of these popes, no dialogue is possible. So what are we doing? It's a fool's errand, as far as I can tell, about what Bishop Lefebvre's wisdom here is saying. And again, it's not just Lefebvre, it's not just me saying these things. It's the SSPX who used to as well. In an open letter signed by the superiors of the SSPX in 1988, again, at the zenith of their counter-revolutionary power or zeal or a dedication, they wrote a letter to Cardinal Ganton. You can still find this on the old SSPX Asia website. It's hard to find some of these old statements. It almost seems as if it's intentional that these are difficult to get to. All of the old superiors of SSPX signed this letter. I want to read just a little bit of it. They say, gathered around our superior general, the superiors of the districts, seminaries, autonomous houses of the SSPX, think it good to express ourselves in the following way. Here's what they say. As for us, we are in full communion with all the popes and bishops before Vatican II. We let you judge on which side the rupture is to be found. We are extremely saddened by the blindness of spirit and the hardening of heart of the Roman authorities. You think they would say this today? Now that they're down to 2 bishops? To Leo? Of course not. But nothing has changed. Actually, it's gotten worse. So objectively, Rome is more blinded by what's happening because they're continuing to cling to their errors. Just as someone who's in sin, who continues to commit mortal sin, they're going to be further blinded by their heresies, by their sins, and darkened to sin. And here's the most, I think, important part. On the other hand, the society says here, 1988, we have never wished to belong to this system which calls itself the Conciliar Church and defines itself with the Novus Ordo Missae, an ecumenism which leads to indifferentism and the laicization of all society. Yes, they said, we have no part with the pantheon of the religions of Assisi. Our own excommunication by a decree of your eminence would only be irrefutable proof of this. We ask, they go on, for nothing better than to be declared out of communion with this adulterous spirit which has been blowing in the church for the last 25 years. We ask for nothing better than to be declared outside of impious communion of the ungodly, and most importantly, to be publicly associated with the sanction which is inflicted upon the 6 bishops would be for us a mark of honor and a sign of orthodoxy before the faithful. This is how the society used to talk. This is what we've lost in the last 15 years, especially since 2012. It is a great sign of sadness. It should make us sad that this is where things are at, especially for the society itself, because its leaders used to speak like this. Would they say this today? Or is it so great? We're back. We're in full communion now with Rome. We're going on this jubilee. We got to say and visit St. John Lateran, walk through the holy door. It's a complete opposite. And Bishop Fellay himself, who led this pilgrimage again, said this. He was very, very strong in the early 2000s, before, or actually even just years after the Grec Association was formed in the 90s. We'll talk about that in another episode. This is when Bishop Fellay, so there he is with Cardinal Ratzinger, Pope Ratzinger. After the Diocese of Campos, again, the Diocese of Campos, Brazil, was the diocese of Bishop de Castro Minor. And they sought refuge in Rome with a deal, Vatican deal, regularization, so to speak, with heretics. In 2003, I think, 2003 or 2002. And Bishop Fellay called this a betrayal, essentially. And here's what he said. It is primarily because of the pluralistic and ecumenical vision of things now prevailing in the Vatican, in the Catholic world. According to this vision, everybody is to mix together without anybody needing any longer to convert. From such a standpoint, there will even be a little room for Catholic tradition. But for our part, we cannot accept this vision. And he says especially, we cannot accept this vision of variable truth any more than a mathematician or mathematics teacher can accept a variable multiplication table. Says it all. Says it all. So anyone who's pushing for normalization, it's being done in the name of pluralistic and ecumenical principles. You might not know it, but based on what Bishop Fellay here has said in 2000 and early 2000s, that's what's going on. He goes on to say, the day will come, we are sure, when Rome will come back to Rome's own tradition. Again, that's the Lefebvre anti-liberal position. Rome has to convert. It's not Rome see us. Okay, again, that's being done in the name of pluralism and liberalism. It's no, Rome, you are wrong. You are dissident. You are out of communion. That's what Bishop Tissier just said. And here we have Bishop Fellay say, for the time being, however, things are not at this point, and to foster illusions will be deadly for the SSPX. Deadly! Don't enter into this pluralistic vortex of heresy in the Vatican. Bishop Fellay goes on. They no longer see the situation in the church as a whole. Diocese of Campos is content with Rome's gesture in favor of a little group of 24 priests. They are forgetting the wood for a single tree. Is it not the case now that the SSPX is forgetting the wood for a single tree? Is it not the case of those influencers and clergy and others in the SSPX and their so-called false friends who are saying this little gesture is being done for this little group of priests? They're no longer saying there's an emergency. This is what Fellay himself said about when Diocese of Campos made a deal with Rome. We can therefore say the same thing about them and the SSPX as they inch towards a more regularized, so-called, relationship. Again, they already have marriages going to the local ordinaries, the local modernist bishops. They already have their confessions, so-called, approved. There's been other things and attitudes. You can obviously see a softening by the superiors of the SSPX on the errors of Rome. Again, when's the last time you heard Father Pagliarani say anything about just the horrors taking place in the Vatican? We're not asking every day for something to be condemnatory. No, we appreciate, trads, the conferences on motherhood and fatherhood and all the other things that are going on in the church and how we need to be traditional and save our souls. Yes, it's all important. Can't just be 100% negative, so-called. But, I think God has sent us, Archbishop Vigano, as one of these stones that are crying out as the SSPX has gone silent to make up for it. Shamefully have to make up for it. Because, again, when you have Bishop Williamson out there talking about current events, global affairs, culture, this is what's needed in this time. The priesthood can't just be a monkish thing. Again, the SSPX will always say, "Oh, well, we're focusing on the priesthood. We just want to cultivate the spiritual life of our priests." You cannot separate the priesthood from what's going on in the world, the church writ large, politics, etc. Look at Father Fahey. Look at all the great priests of the 20th century. Father Coughlin. They were actively involved in the public square. Not every priest has to be, but those who have the responsibility and the status and the preeminence to comment on those affairs and can see the errors going on in them, seems to me they have a duty to do so. And the SSPX, seems to me, has failed on that, which is why You have influencers today say, oh, this is so great. We're back. Not back. Not back at all. Here's also another analogy made by Bishop Tissier, Bishop Fellay. Their perspective, he's talking about Rome, is pluralism. Their thinking goes something like this. Oh, look, if we have progressive people who do silly things as members of the church, then we should also have a place for those who like tradition. A place in the middle of this circus, of this zoo, a place for dinosaurs and prehistoric animals. That's our place, he says about the SSPX. But just stay in your zoo. Stay in your cage. They will train us, he says. You can get your foot, the old mass, that's for the dinosaurs, but only for the dinosaurs. Don't give that food to the other animals. And he says, this is why we cannot reconcile where this mentality is prevalent. We cannot go in and make a deal with those who are so convinced of this attitude. And Leo is convinced of this attitude. They all are. You could have got Cardinal Burke in there and he would still be the same attitude. Because why? Because they're all devoted to the Vatican II revolution. There are conservative liberals, moderate liberals, radical liberals, liberal liberals, right? They'd run the church these days, the conciliar church. Francis was an extreme liberal, radical liberal, right? Benedict maybe more of a moderate. Leo maybe more of a moderate, but he's still in that milieu, still agrees with those same principles, which is why he's promoting women, which is why he's talking about synodality, which is why he's praising Francis, which is why he's doing all the things he's doing. Talking and focusing mostly on social justice, talking and focusing mostly on how Catholics need to feel good about themselves. He's not talking about doctrine. Lastly, here's, I think, the giveaway, or rather the strongest argument, rather, against the prevailing attitude so many have about this pilgrimage. This is from Bishop Fellay in 2002, again, right around that time when Campos was making a deal. He said this: what kind of Rome do we have when it can sign an agreement with Campos and in the same week can do something like a CC2? Good question. They definitely will not say we recognize tradition in any universal sense. But Campos is contented because Rome has recognized tradition in Campos. But has it really? It's a good question. If Rome truly recognized tradition, Bishop Fellay said in 2002, anywhere, it wouldn't be able to have an CC2. Again, talking about under Benedict when Assisi was held, which is contrary to tradition. It is impossible to see in the recognition of Campos a recognition of tradition. All right. Now, let's take that and apply it to the situation now with the SSPX. Let's update it. Because, again, the SSPX is down to 2 bishops. They need clergy. They need approval, or it seems they want approval from the Vatican. If I was Vatican, I would just string them out. Let them say, hey, you've dug your grave and you're going to lay in it. Because if the SSPX goes ahead and consecrates without approval from the Vatican, they now justify everything Bishop Williamson did after he was kicked out, after his excommunication. They have no leg to stand on against the resistance bishops and clergy, because they themselves said the situation is such that we are in a state of emergency, just as Lefebvre was in 1988, that allows us to do this without Roman approval. So the SSPX is in pretty much a hard spot, in an impossible situation. What do we do? If they do it, if they do get approval, well, it just undercuts everything we've been hearing this episode from Bishop Fellay, Bishop Tissier, Archbishop Lefebvre. Because here's, if we apply what Bishop Fellay just said to the situation under Leo, if there is a deal more explicitly made, I think you can say this: what kind of Rome do we have when it can sign an agreement with the Society of St. Pius X, and in the same year can do something like the Mass for the Care of Creation and continue to push synodality? They will definitely not say we recognize tradition in any universal sense. But the SSPX is content because Rome has recognized tradition in the society. But has it really? If Rome truly recognized tradition anywhere, it wouldn't offer a Mass for the Care of Creation and continue to push synodality, the very opposite of tradition. It is impossible to see in the recognition of the Society of St. Pius X a recognition of tradition. And that's it. That's the whole thing. that shows and summarizes everything that's going wrong, or that you might say influencers and those who are very, very happy about this pilgrimage are missing. They don't know, in my view, the history of the SSPX, what they've said in the past, what its leaders have done. And that's really a sad thing. So we here at Cox News will continue to shine a light on this. Go to our website today. The SSPX goes to modernist Rome, the ecumenical zoo. Is there a side chapel for tradition in the conciliar church for the SSPX? And I think definitely, what will happen here coming up in the next year or 6 months. I think this is, as happened last time when the SSPX went to Rome. I think it was 2000, when John Paul proclaimed a Jubilee year. That had an impact on relations with the Vatican over the next 10 years, 10, 15 years. And I would not be surprised to see if Leo does allow or grant them permission for bishops. When that happens, we don't know. Obviously, there's a lot of infighting still going on. Who those bishops might be, will they be tainted by being known as the bishops who were approved by Leo? I mean, think about that. The Chinese bishops over in China are criticized, roundly for having been nominated by Leo and with approval of the Chinese Communist state. What do we think of the new potential SSPX bishops who are approved by modernist Rome, by the kosher Catholics who are running the show in the Vatican? I mean, what is our focus? Again, needs to be on exposing the modernists in Rome, those who are occupying the situation, occupying powers in the Vatican, right? Who are continuing to put the boot down on the neck of real traditionalists, real Catholics, but will play ball and have played ball and courted over the last several decades the SSPX, which today is just looking like the FSSP 2.0. So, okay, everybody, thanks. That's it for today. Again, August 22nd, Friday. I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you for watching today. Until next time, God bless and take care.